said, I don't have a lot to say. I have a lot of feelings about it, but it's hard to speak from a position of authority about it because I'm as impacted as everybody else watching it. So I'm kind of interested in other people's opinion too. I noticed a lot about the cinematography. It was Michael Ballhaus, and I noticed the way von Trotta had identified the light with the Schmidt. What's her name? Was Helen? Olga's character. She always came out of the light, and Ruth and Olga. Ruth was always in darkness, and in her apartment with her husband, they were always in the dark, and she was always in the dark, and kind of came out of the dark to some kind of lightness. So in some ways, there's a kind of Jungian between the two women. There's kind of two sides of something, and one is light and one is darkness, and the unconscious is the repressed is very much identified with Ruth's character. She has no voice. She opens the film with her by the window, and then she comes and lies down. She's dressed in black. Almost for the first third of the film, she's always wearing black. And then she starts coming out of that. She starts having a voice when she starts painting, and she comes out in red, and then she's wearing a red skirt, which is in Egypt. So she's just coming out of that place of repression, of not having a voice. And she speaks at the beginning of the film about being giving a speech, but everybody knows what she's going to say, so it has no meaning, basically. So she doesn't feel like she has any worth at all in the film. And I think that's a state of mind that most of us feel. Many different times we have to struggle with that lack of voice in a patriarchal society, and also being told by, as her husband, the voice that we hear all the time, especially young women, are, you can achieve anything. You can be anything you want to. He says to her, but you could have been a teacher. I didn't stop you. I support you to do that. Go out and do that. It's up to you. I'll support you again. So there's always that voice on the one hand from the outside that says everything's fine. But then the reality is that it's still a very male-dominated world, and a white male-dominated world at that. But and women have various places they have in that society. So sometimes it's good. Sometimes you feel like you can achieve everything, and sometimes you feel like you even beat yourself up for not achieving things because you feel like you should be able to do it all.
Right.
So there's a lot of different voices in the film. It really exaggerates those things and makes it very black and white at times. And those were the 70s. That was made in 1982. So there had been a real experience of feminism in the 60s and 70s, and zero women filmmakers, very few, one or two, in film history. And so with the opening of a new wave in Germany, you got a few women coming out, and von Trotta was one of them. Helga Sanders was another German movement.
When you brought up what I was going to
next,
would you say Magarethe von Trotta would be considered a feminist filmmaker, or how do you feel about that term?
Well, I know that she feels that that was a dangerous ghetto to be identified as a woman's filmmaker, because then you could be dismissed easily or put in a category. And so she is a very clever filmmaker. I mean, those scenes that she constructed, scene after scene after scene, were beautifully directed, and the acting was very, beautifully directed. So she really, has quite a history of great filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. Well, and obviously you work in the documentary business. So
right.
What would you say the role of women there is compared to maybe fiction film or relationship?
Well, you've seen in the last, 20 years, especially with the advent of digital technology, it's affordable. So women have entered that sphere of documentary filmmaking and brought with them a lot of the qualities that have for so long been considered, inferior in some way. Listening, being listeners, not the ones that are talking and leading the show, but listening. So in documentary, those very qualities come out to be very big pluses, because you're receptive to your subject matter in a way that sometimes in the past people are projecting onto them. So there are a lot of great women documentary filmmakers around, and young women too. Are the technology is not intimidating anymore. You don't have to shoot documentaries on film.
Right.
You know.
And would you say in your experience as a documentarian, you hadn't met any resistance as a woman or had any obstacles specifically because of that? Or
Not really. Not as a woman. Not in documentary.
But you said in film school then?
In films, when I went to film school in the 70s, I wanted to be a cinematographer. So I'd been a painter for about 6 years, and I felt that film was a place where you could have a political voice. And because I didn't want to have a literal voice, I didn't want to direct or write scripts. I wanted to document. I wanted to be a cinematographer and bring an aesthetic quality to stories. Quiet voice, a silent voice. Use that voice in a positive way through cinematography. So I wasn't a very extrovert person. I really didn't want to direct people or anything. But in cinematography, it's a lot harder to get along as a female because at that time, especially in the 70s and 80s, there were very few women around. It was very hard to get into the film union. This was in London, so it was different. But I eventually had a break with a feature film, and I started shooting a lot of films.
That's all for my questions.
Okay.
Is anyone from the audience?
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you to maybe comment on something about the film. I noticed that this is a film that's a lot about victimization or the concept of a victim. And it kind of seemed to me, because from very early on that idea is introduced, but Olga seems to be the only character that doesn't either rely upon being a victim to get what she wants, or she isn't really directly victimized.
Right.
How do you feel about that? Because Franz he definitely relies upon playing the victim to get what he wants, and Ruth is victimized, is the most victimized character. But it seems like every single character, other than Olga, in some way, like it functions in that fashion.
Right. That's why her logic and her rationality, she's always in a very light environment. When there's something kind of light about her. She's very, she uses a lot of reason, but she uses her intuition and her emotions as well. Ruth is like lost in that kind of victimization. And her husband, he's really, he's not really what he does in a sense is really repressive, but he isn't really mean to. They're in a codependent situation where he's dependent on feeling that she needs him and that she's very weak, and he feels his strength by helping her. So on the one hand, he's doing all this political work about nuclear proliferation, and at home he has this private public sphere. His private life is not at all about freedom or democracy or liberalizing anything. But you kind of feel von Trotta, I thought, until the end when he started getting that conversation at the last dinner scene in Italy where they're all around the table and all that stuff starts flying and accusations about who's repressing who and everything. That gets to be very ideological. But as a character, he's not a bad person. He's just, he's dependent on her being that way. He needs to feel that he matters that way.
Then why does he get shot, Nancy?
Well, I think it's kind of Thelma and Louise ending, except they don't go off a cliff together. I mean, it's violence. Repression turns into violence if it doesn't have an outlet. If you don't have a creative outlet, you either show violence to yourself or you become violent towards other people. Oppression, economic oppression, or psychic repression can have these two outlets.
Yeah, I hate to make this comparison,
Yeah.
but the ending of this film reminded me a lot of The Awakening, which is actually a book I really don't like.
I didn't see that.
It's a book. It was written.
Kate Chopin.
Okay, yeah, Kate Chopin wrote it. But it just the ending of it always bothered me, and the ending of this film doesn't bother me quite as much, but it feels stylistically very similar. It's like a whole story about repression and victimization, and then just a very violent ending, like a very blunt ending like this. It's weird.
Well, there are a lot of women in prison for killing their abusive husbands. I mean, there are a few women, not a lot, I don't know how many, but but there are many cases of domestic violence where women react in the end with violence. But the majority are murdered and killed. In San Antonio alone, there's 12 murder victims last year as a result of domestic violence. Pretty high death count a year. So,
how do you feel that that ending plays into the rest of the story? Because I'm having a tough time with it.
yeah, I know. That's a killer. The ending. I mean, it really stays with you, and it's in black and white. So it's her point of view of what she did, of her. Because it's a very shocking shot when it comes in. You see her standing there, and then she shoots it, and you think she shot herself for a minute, because she goes like that, and there's a gunshot, and then you hear the body fall. So, I don't know. What does other people feel about the ending? I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Had there not been the court scene at the end, I would kind of view that more as a symbolic thing, but with the court scene, it makes it pretty clear that it actually happened. So, I kind of have to wonder if maybe that was tacked on to clarify.
Right. Possibly. I mean, Ruth never really succeeds at becoming kind of a whole person. You see her attachment to her mother, which is not. She never seems to really become a separate self, a whole self. And she has attachment issues, and she doesn't really make it. I don't think at the end. Maybe before she does that act, she had maybe a chance. And there's a friendship. I mean, there's a hint that it's a lesbian relationship, but it's more really like two sisters, like friends, that really are, close. So,
Did you have a question?
Yeah.
No, I kind of lost thought.
Oh,
when
sorry.
I got some insights when she kind of clarified with the insight with the court scene, where everything was, where all the cinematography is very great, because you have the mixing with the color, with the scenes with Olga, and then you have the scenes sometimes in black and white, mostly with Ruth.
That's very powerful. Those shifts and combines the color, black and white. Yeah.
Sometimes I was a bit confused because they might have been either dream images or they're like flashbacks.
What did you think of her paintings being in black and white?
I think she's just trying to reach out or trying to express herself in her way, because she just seems just that repressed. Like, she doesn't know anything else besides just her family.
Right.
And then when she meets Ruth, Ruth meets Olga, she's doing a lot more color.
Yeah, that's right. There's that terrible scene when she does try to commit suicide the first time in the hospital, the only time in the hospital, and she comes home, and she's surrounded by all the colorful flowers, and she lies on the bed like a corpse, as she does in the beginning of the film. And she's wearing black again, I think. And there's all these colorful flowers around her, and the paintings just behind her, black and white.
Well, my comment on the art is that her own art was the cosmos, which is really strange and deep and symbolic of reaching and yearning and all that. The stars way off in the distance, and stars, galaxies, etc. Because I think all of her paintings, if I remember right, were astronomy.
At the beginning, she was doing
Aside
copies of.
well, the copies, but her own paintings
Yeah.
were all astronomy, which is kind of weird.
Right.
Which is a whole different thing than just black and white copies.
Yeah, and there was a mention of that. Don't you do anything original?
Yeah.
And there was kind of lack of confidence in being able to do something of her own. And she comes
But tossing a grenade in your direction, what did you think of the classroom scene in Cairo where they had the students dancing?
Yeah.
I thought that was a stroke of genius.
That was beautiful, really, because, this filmmaker, is trying to hit every single point. She's trying to reach out. She's trying to say, look at these women in the third world. They're grappling with economic and repression from the law. They don't have the same human rights. They don't have the same civil rights that women in the West have. And yet they were so, intelligent and trying to make sense of things and understanding in a way. And then you saw the scenes in the streets where all the women were together and holding hands and walking. So it makes you think about the third world and how loneliness is not a word in some cultures. They don't even have that word because there's so much connection within the family. And yet they don't have certain civil rights that we have. And in our society, isolation and loneliness is a major ailment.
That one thing I saw in the rural shots of the farmhouses was how dynamic and alive so many of the people there were. Some of the older women there were just sort of zombied out, and they were beat, and life had ground them down. But the children were just incredibly full of energy and joie de vivre. But which is not the case of anybody else wandering around in Germany in that movie.
And don't forget, these were, in your German New Wave, were the children of, their parents had been in the war. They were born when the war was still going on. She was born in 42. Von Trotta was born in 42. Her father was a painter and never married her mother. Her mother was a single mom, and her father was a painter. So anyway, thank you.
I think we're about to, or we can wrap up.
Well, I'd just like to thank you, Laura, and Brian for having this incredible series, Cinema 41. It's one of the most exciting and very coolest things happening in Austin, because you show such amazing movies that